Good evening once again and welcome. Tonight I'm going to be reviewing The Pillowman by McDonagh. Some of you may be wondering why my copy of The Pillowman is so ratty-tatty and full of little notes. Well, that's because I was just in it. I played Katurian, the sort of lead character in it. A small play of four people, two actors playing the secret policeman, one actor playing my, am I allowed to say retarded? Brother. That's how he's described in the play. And in other productions, they sometimes have people playing the mother and father who mime or say a couple of lines. But in this, we didn't do that. We did it a slightly different way. And we also had a little girl come on at one point to punctuate a scene, but at risk of spoiling things, I won't tell you when that was. Anyway, the play went really well. It's a community theater effort. Nobody's paid, but we have some, we have quite an impressive stable of trained actors in my neck of the woods, and I've got a little bit of experience, and so we put on, if I may say so, I think a pretty high quality show, and the audiences seem to like it. And now it's all over. Now, this is a dark and controversial play written by McDonagh. Came out in 2003, has since won a whole bunch of awards. If you want to know what all those awards were, just Wikipedia it. The plot is a writer in a totalitarian country that is unnamed is interrogated about the gruesome content of his short stories, some of which bear similarities to a series of child murders happening in his town. I'm not going to go over all that stuff. I only want to share with you an interpretation of this play that I've never seen before. So for the purposes of The Pillowman, I'm not going to go over the plot. I'm not going to go over the characters. If you're totally new to this, then this isn't a video for you to start with. But if you've seen or read The Pillowman and are already familiar with it, I'd like to raise something with you for your consideration. There is a very good article written online. I don't know who the author is. It doesn't actually say. But the name of the website is whyreadplays.com, and it's The Pillowman. I'll link to it in the description of this video, and it goes through all what The Pillowman's about and makes, talks about how it's ostensibly about whether or not playwrights are responsible for their art and for what things happen as a consequence. Does art imitate life, and vice versa. McDonagh, as the author points out, notes that McDonagh himself said, if somebody went out and committed murders, having seen The Pillowman, I'd feel guilty, but I wouldn't feel culpable for it. So on one level, there's that. Then the author also points out that the playwright that McDonagh is creating an allegory in the sense that Katurian is an allegory for writers themselves and not simply just the writer. It's a very good article. It goes into a lot of detail. I strenuously, however, disagree with the author's characterization of Katurian as like a terrible person. He calls him a deluded egoist, and apparently simply because the Katurian is willing to tell the secret policeman that he'll take out anything that they find offensive in his writing, that apparently he's bad. Like, apparently he's a terrible... he's not just weak and cowardly. He's a terrible, awful, deluded egoist if he doesn't say, oh, no, shoot me in the head before I change anything in my stories. I mean, the guy was being tortured and interrogated and so on, and, he's only got his brother. He's the sole caretaker of his brother, whom at that point he thinks is a total innocent. He just wants to get out of that room unscathed. He's going to say whatever he can to the policeman. He has no idea that this is about a series of child murders. So I don't know. I felt certainly Katurian has killed his parents, but he killed them for a good reason, for what they'd done to his brother. So I didn't agree with some of the assumptions made by that author. But that's on the aside. I'm including it because it goes into a discussion of what allegory is. It talks a lot about the different different stories that Katurian tells in the course of the Pillowman. He talks about the character of Katurian as related to the fairy tales. I think, however, as a sort of complete analysis, that article is vastly superior to anything I'm going to say today. I think he was trying to write I'm assuming it was a he. It could very well not have been though. He was giving a kind of complete analysis of what the play's about. I'm not going to give the interpretation. I'm going to give an interpretation, or maybe a footnote to an interpretation, to steal a line from the end of the show. I think there's a crucial element being left out. He mentions a tiny bit of it in passing, but I think he misses something that is really at the heart of what McDonagh's talking about. Whether or not McDonagh intended this as his allegory, the deeper allegory to the allegory, I don't know. Again, Martin McDonagh declines to say anything about it, but on the other hand, I have a feeling he might be, but he's maybe afraid to say it because he knows that this topic is very unpopular among the cultured despisers in the theater world. Basically, what I think that the author of the other article pointed out, what's missing from that article, and what indeed I think is a crucial element to the Pillowman, is that I think that the Pillowman, in some ways, allegorically, not a perfect allegory, it doesn't all tie together because it is a story, but there are elements brought in to make it a coherent story. I think a crucial ingredient that is left out of any analysis I've seen in the Pillowman is the idea that the Pillowman play is a irreverent, shall we say, irreverent and or blasphemous and or pagan / atheistic. Again, people will quibble with every term. Well, pagan isn't atheist. Atheist isn't pagan. It's not blasphemous. If we don't believe in God, it's not blasphemous because there is no God. All that shit. All right, just in a very general sense, retelling of the trial of Jesus Christ. Yep. I think there's something going on here. Now, at the same time, I don't think it's exclusively that, because let me get out of the way that, again, oddly not mentioned in the other article, Martin McDonagh is clearly playing around with us a little bit. The relationship between Katurian and his retarded brother. Yeah, he's giving little nods, Easter eggs we'd call them in movies, of mice and men. Katurian not understanding why he's being interrogated by the police and them not sort of telling him right away why he's there. That's Kafka's The Trial. The fact that it's all Russian names and an unnamed totalitarian state. I don't know. Let's go with Dostoevsky. Could just as well be Solnev or Bakurin or several others. All right, there maybe Tolstoy, but my money's on Dostoevsky. He's no Chekhov, but probably something. There's probably some Chekhovian elements in there. I was in a couple of Chekhov plays when I was in high school, but that was a long time ago, and I haven't read nearly enough of Chekhov to find credible links between things in the script besides the Russian names, or at least Eastern European names. I actually think the names do matter a little bit, but for different reasons, nothing to do with Chekhov. But all right, so why is this, or what is its relationship to the trial of Jesus? Who are the characters? Is Katurian Jesus Christ? No. Let me get that out of the way right at the beginning. I do not think he is Jesus Christ at all. Jesus, bear with me, is represented by Michael, the retarded brother who's also a child killer. how do you get that? How do you get the irreverent, atheistic, pagan element into all of that? Well, Jesus is the Prince of Peace, an innocent who calls us to be like innocent as doves and childlike in our faith, loves children. Well, this guy brings you in with his innocence and kills children, but is in a sense innocent, and so the murder of the children is perhaps a hearkening to all of the so-called evil that's been done in the name of Christianity after it became a religion. So you have this innocent figure who although ostensibly is portrayed as the Prince of Peace in the Gospels, is a child killer in the sense that so many people have been killed in the name of Christianity. So it's all a bit of an ironic twist toward the dark, which is in keeping with the fact that Katurian himself was, or that, there's all this child torture and child trauma being inflicted on the characters to the extent that they now take things and twist everything in a dark direction, even at the sort of meta level of what the play's about. So yeah, you've got him as Jesus. So who's Katurian then, the writer? Well, I suspect that Katurian is God / the anonymous writers of the gospel. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Now, of course, those names we don't know anything about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, so we can call it anonymous. And as it is supposedly the Word of God, we can say God is the author of these Gospels. Again, atheism. No, it's not, because Christianity isn't. Shut up, man. This is literary analysis. Okay. No one is assuming the truth of Christianity here, dickhead. So take off your hat and relax. Shave your neck beard. So you've got Katurian as God, an author of these Gospels, meaning that they're his stories. He's written 400 or so stories, 400 for 4 Gospels. I don't know. I'm stretching with some of these things. And again, is God responsible for the stories that he writes? So it does dovetail with what the other guy is talking about is the writer responsible for the things he creates. But so none of what that author of that other article said is incorrect in terms of his analysis. I just think that there's an extra element, that it's not simply impugning Katurian as the archetype of a writer. I think the archetype I'm going one more after the idea of archetype to the idea of God, specifically within Christianity, which is Martin McDonagh was raised English-Irish, so he's got a Catholic background, even if I know he's no longer a practicing Catholic, but he and his brother have almost always feature religious themes in their work, and they tend to do it quite respectfully as well. In Cavalry, his brother did a lovely film about that. The Banshees of Inisherin has religious themes in there between the Protestants and the Catholics and so on. Anyway, so you've got the Gospels telling the story with okay, sorry, there was all this noise in the background. I'm having trouble with this. I'm going to close the Pillowman. So here are my notes. So you've got Michael the Archangel. Well, probably not. Michael. He's tortured by his parents for 7 years for no reason other than as an artistic experiment. This could be an atheistic reference to the aesthetic and ethical ugliness and absurdity of a creator God requiring a torture and sacrifice to atone for a situation he ultimately created. Michael, in the end, also freely chooses to go to the cross and endure all that suffering that he could have avoided by committing suicide. Again, we have to weave in the pagan element that Katurian notes, because Katurian says, it's not about being or not being dead, it's about what you leave behind. Within the ancient Greek worldview, when they believe that everyone goes to Hades no matter what, no matter what kind of life you lived, your only hope at immortality was in what you left behind, was in seeking to attain kleos, the Greek word for glory. So Achilles, say in the Iliad, he wasn't worried about being good or bad. It was about being great. So slaughtering towns and villages and all that was fine, so long as you were immortalized in great poetry, like the Iliad, or on a Grecian urn, as Keats would say. So the idea is that your only immortality is achieved through epic poetry and writing and so on. So there is that element in which that Katurian harbors, seeking immortality, whereas in the sense of, in Michael's case, he doesn't seek immortality through writing. Instead, as a representation of the Christ figure, his immortality comes by freely choosing to take up the cross, as mentioned by the little girl, and enduring all of that suffering, so that the more pagan-minded, ironically, Katurian can achieve his desired immortality. Again, nothing is a pure allegory. So if I say Katurian is both God and a pagan writer seeking immortality, what I'm coming across with there is the fact that this is an atheistic retelling, and so in the mind of someone like Martin McDonagh, Katurian, even if he was some kind of religious figure, as an anonymous writer, it's not the word of God. Instead, it's a person trying to seek some kind of immortality through their writing, and it's the irony of the fact that they are known as the true writers of them have achieved immortality of a sort, but we don't actually know their true identity. You see, so he's only looking at it through an atheistic lens. He would only see them as pagans seeking immortality in the otherwise forgottenness of a empty, in the black gloom of an empty forest. I know, it sounds so convoluted. Maybe I should have written it down as an essay, but there's a lot going on here. What else have we got? Yeah, yeah. He martyrs himself to gain immortality as well. God is also an atheist. Kleos thwarted by yeah. So who are Topolsky and Ariel? Well, I think that they represent the two factions calling for Jesus' death. On the one hand, you have Topolsky, who I see as the figure of Pontius Pilate, sort of stoic, above it all, doesn't seem emotionally invested in this thing, as opposed to Ariel, which is, I would say, represents the Jewish Sanhedrin. Ariel, maybe by coincidence, maybe not, in 2003 when the play was published, Ariel Sharon was the Prime Minister of Israel at the time. So Ariel, although violent and calling for his blood right from the start, is ironically the one who goes against the wishes of Topolsky, who washes his hands of it, and saves the stories from destruction. Salvation is from the Jews, in that sense, that even though Ariel rejects the stories that he doesn't like, in the same sense that the Jewish people reject Jesus, they are responsible, however, for the immortality that Katurian sought. Meaning the writers of the Gospels / God. It is through the actions of Ariel that God brings his messages to the world, right? That's how Katurian stories are saved, that even though God dies in that room at the end of his trial, Katurian dies at the end of his trial, as Jesus died, and Jesus being God in the Trinitarian sense, the immortality is achieved, that the Jewish figure is the one that is responsible for the stories being kept. That was kind of my main idea, and I thought that was kind of interesting. What about it? What else? Well, also, you know, in the original readings of the Gospels, you had you had the Roman. In the original readings of the Gospels, it is the Jews that insist on on Jesus being killed, and you had the Roman governor being very reluctant to do it. Nowadays, we always say Jesus was killed by the Romans, but we leave out the part that it was at the insistence of the Jewish Sanhedrin, who threatened to revolt if they didn't. So the fact that Topolsky is the one who brings about Katurian's death with that little sleight of hand thing about, well, you were going to make a truthful confession and so on, that in a sense is a bit of a PC nod. But at the same time, I'm getting, Pontius Pilate asked Jesus, what is truth? And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And Pontius Pilate is sympathetic toward him and wonders about him. Here you have Katurian, who said he would tell the truth and ends up lying, but for a good and holy reason. So I see that more as an inversion, and that it is indeed what gets Topolsky to want to destroy the stories and end any memory of Katurian. What else? Ending with the fashionably downbeat ending. Well, let me come back to that. I want to end with that. Yeah, I'm going to end with my comment on the fashionably downbeat ending. Again, this is unstructured. I just had some notes. The three-gibbet cross. I'm looking for clues. Again, this is not. I'm saying to myself, is this what the allegory really is, or are there Christian themes embedded in the story, even at an unconscious level? I don't think it is unconscious. I think McDonagh is playing around with the Gospels, because he has the little Jesus, and there is a lot of New Testament imagery and allegory in this play. So it's not like a direct. I can think of at least one cast member who would look at this and go, no, that's stupid. It's not that, because I didn't think of it. But it's just be a little open to these elements. So the three-gibbet crossroads story, which is one of the stories by Katurian, presents a puzzle without a solution. I read that as being God's non-answer to Job's suffering. I also read it as asking the hypothetical question of what is the so-called unforgivable sin mentioned in the New Testament that is never given an answer. So you have oh God, why am I not thinking? So you have the person in the three-gibbet crossroads story not understanding what they did wrong, asking what their sin was and why they're being put to death, why they're being put through all that suffering, and the hangman only laughs. I think there is a reference to Job's suffering there, and also playing around with the idea of the unforgivable sin. Also, maybe the Euthyphro dilemma, being caught on the horns of the Euthyphro, is, does God do? Is the good be that which the God wills, or does the God will it because it is good? Meaning that it ascribes to some other standard other than God's character himself. Maybe that one's more of a stretch. The Tale of the Town on the River, which is the Hamlin story. The analyst talked about it being an inversion of the idea that if you do something in good faith, then you have nothing to fear, and instead makes it out that the person you made a deal with was out to harm you the whole time. I will take it from more of the evangelical atheist perspective, which argues through people like Bertrand Russell, even people like David Icke, that Christianity in particular presents the fake problem. They offer you a fake problem idea that you're all born in sin, and then offers a phony solution, and in doing so steals the innocence from you, steals the hearts of the innocent, and binds you over to something that is false. So yeah, they the Pied Piper created a fake problem in the sense that he brought the rats, offered a solution, and said, here's what you need to do to be saved, and ends up, leaving you penniless and without your kids, which is what atheists will say religion tends to do. It takes your money, steals your children away from you, and leaves you bereft. The writer and the writer's brother. I mean, this is the main story in the Pillowman. So seeing these these stories are integral to the actual story. These are for the Pillowman. So I'm not seeing any direct, swapping out Katurian for God and all that kind of thing. I also think that if there is something there, Katurian creates a fake ending to an otherwise meaningless life on behalf of Jesus. Again, that's an atheistic sentiment toward the character of, a retarded Jesus who just had delusions of grandeur. And again, with the Pillowman is a little more apt because it is a presentation of the problem of existence for atheism. When life is absurd and meaningless and full of pain, why bother to live? And again, from the Greek perspective, hope was the last monster to come out of Pandora's box, because it was that monster that bamboozled humans into unnecessarily prolonging their suffering, which was just going to end up in Hades anyway. That no matter what they did in life, they were going to end up in the same place, so they may as well commit suicide and at least avoid the temporal suffering on Earth and just go straight to Hades, where they would just wander around as a gibbering shade in the afterlife. The idea of using a big fluffy Pillowman, this gentle, weird creature, to convince kids to kill themselves and avoid suffering. Well, when life is absurd and meaningless as it is on an atheistic paradigm, it requires an absurd solution, as is seen in the figure of the Pillowman. I didn't say atheists are all absurd and meaningless and incapable of giving their lives meaning, so put away your fedora and shave your neckbeard again. I'm just saying, objectively, in the absence of any sort of transcendent reality, in a world of only atoms and molecules, life has no intrinsic objective meaning or objective intrinsic purpose, and it comes down to what you, the individual, happens to impose upon it on a subjective level. That's all. But it is absurd as a result. The little pig story, well, Jesus was different. They tried to make him into something else. They tried to force him to become like them. They changed themselves into that which they hated. He claimed to be the Messiah. They didn't accept him as Messiah because he wasn't what they expected. Again, it's part of this comes down to McDonagh just rejecting Christianity and also having a very poor understanding of theology. But he does throw in this little reference here that he liked being a little bit peculiar. Again, may just be a coincidence, but he could have just been a little bit different. But on top of that, he's a little bit peculiar. This goes back to the reference in 1 Peter 2:9 in the King James Version as belonging to God is his possession. That word is peculiar, being strange, being different is how it appears in the modern transaction. McDonagh is probably using it that way. But the little green pig, in being a little bit peculiar, it's a sign that he's not part of this world. He already belongs to God, and he's happy being different in that way. And of course, it also works simply as just being a little retarded guy who's kind of sweet and innocent. But again, it's an allegory. The little Jesus, I think, is the most straightforward. Again, it's McDonagh mocking the idea of we're supposed to be like little children when it comes to faith, but look what little children do. They are susceptible to abuse by people that ironically hate Jesus. And if they follow things too literally, they invite their own suffering. Funnily enough, McDonagh is maybe even being a little bit sympathetic toward people, like good-hearted people who become Christians, and how they can be set upon by wolves, but that they become ultimately the authors of their own demise because they have ascribed to a phony doctrine all along. That the real reality is that they live in a cold, dark universe that doesn't give a shit about them. So there's lots and lots of... You can almost argue that this is less of an allegory of Christianity and more of an atheistic meditation on longing for God. And here's where I'm going to say the ending comes in. The fashionably downbeat ending is an atheistic ending. The people struggle. He writes his stories, has them burned from the world. Michael goes through all that torment, and it's all for nothing, right? All a bunch of sound and fury signifying nothing, okay? But then, for reasons known only to himself, again, it's Ariel, the one who rejects the message, for some reason sets it aside and allows the stories to continue, offering up a bit of a hope, tacking on a bit of a Christian worldview in the end. That despite the darkness, despite the pain, despite everything that was expected of us, especially in modern theater, McDonagh gives you an ending that was somehow more in keeping of the thing, which is why I feel that this Christian stuff is deliberate there, more in keeping, somehow, more in keeping with the spirit of the thing, the Holy Spirit of the thing, that maybe he does really mean that there's a quietly, gently, faintly Christian sympathetic message behind the play. That on the surface everything is atheistic, cold and dark, and that we just make up stories to push away the darkness and the pointlessness of it all. And yet when the ending comes and the pointlessness comes crashing in, reasserting reality, it still has another twist whereby the stories that were supposed to be burned and destroyed and reassert the hopelessness and pointlessness of it all, they still have a future. And who guarantees that future? Well, the bulldog of a policeman who shares a name with a Jewish prime minister. Yeah. I think he's playing around with stuff. I really do. I don't know that what I've just said is a whole analysis. It's certainly not a full analogy. It's not like, the Pillowman really is just Jesus dying on the, in some kind of Kafka. It's like Jesus in a Kafka trial. Except I think maybe it is. It's up to you. Anyway, I've gone on long enough. I offered that for your consideration, simply to see whether any of what I've said made sense. It's totally up to you. You can just go, oh no, man, you've got a theology background, so you're shoehorning in your religion everywhere. I wonder that too. But if you can do feminist readings of 1984, I can do a Christian reading of The Pillowman. The difference is that I think I find quite a lot of scriptural support in the script to back up some of my ideas. Anyway, thank you to everybody who saw the play, and hope you all enjoy it. I welcome any comments. Please don't be some stupid atheist, though, saying, hey man, he doesn't believe in God and God doesn't exist, and so this is just dumb. Like, why do you have to turn something into something? I'm like, no, I'm not. It's not like that. And so, yeah, put away your fedora, shave your neck beard. Ciao.